What's up, NAIA Report Nation? It's your boy Manny here. Welcome back to the Hoop Report, the NAIA Women's Basketball Podcast, episode number 43. It's a special one, very near and dear to my heart. Breaking news, some could even say. Ladies and gentlemen, Lex is back, y'all. What's up, man? Obviously, it's been a while since we've had Lex on. He's been handling business. He's been doing stuff that on his own and making sure that things are moving in the right direction. Obviously, it's the first time you're on here since the new year. Lots happened since the last time you've been on here. I can't wait to get into it. I think there's going to be a lot of exciting things. You know, we talked a little bit about it before we recorded. January is the big month. Everything kind of gets rolling. We always talk about February and March, but that starts in January. I think January really is the dog days of the season because you're playing 2 times every week, playing against the same opponents almost every other week. It's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot drawn out. It can be boring at times, but sometimes that's where teams get got, and we've seen that happen already with these past couple weeks. This is the 18th of January when we're recording this. And we've seen upsets all over the place. We've seen conferences start getting turned upside down. We're gonna talk a lot. Gonna jump around a little bit here, but I think the majority of our episode today is gonna be focused on the Crossroads, the SAC, and the Heart. We're gonna start at the Crossroads in a new edition of This or That. Obviously, we're gonna talk about 2 specific points that I think need to be kind of harped on, and kind of 2 storylines that can go either way here. And we're gonna start with the biggest upset of the day in the Crossroads, maybe of the weekend. I'd go even that far. Number 5, Marion falls to receiving votes Huntington. Lex, the this or that question is simple. Has the Crossroads caught up to Marion, a team that for the longest time, pretty much all year, has been one of the best, if not, I'd say one of the best for sure in the country and the best in the Crossroads, or is it just a hiccup? It's just a hiccup. Marion right now, they're 1-3 in their last 3 games. They've lost now 2 times, 2 teams in the Crossroads. Kind of what is your take on those 2 sides of things? Do you think it's the Crossroads just getting a lot better as the season has progressed? Or has Marion might have just maybe hit a hiccup here and we'll get back into the way it was in a few weeks?
If I had to decide on one answer, primarily, I would probably say it's a hiccup. But I'm a big fan of some stuff changing around. I think change is good sometimes. It keeps things interesting. It keeps things exciting still. But like you said, January is important for every team going into the second half of the season. And I want to give it the benefit of the doubt that maybe this Marion team starting out is just having a hard time adjusting post, the holiday. Would I love it to change? For sure. Put somebody else on the top. Shake things up a bit, but I'm just going to say it's a hiccup.
I'm not mad at it. I'm going to go the opposite, and not just for argument's sake, but I do believe it. I do believe the Crossroads is kind of caught up to Marion. I mean, like I mentioned, for the first time this season in a 3-game window, they are 1-3. The only win coming against Indiana Western when they went 84-47. But the reason I say it's the Crossroads is because those 2 teams that they lost to are teams that are in the running for the conference standings. We look at the standings here. I got it pulled up. St. Francis, who we will touch on in a moment here, they're number 1 right now at 8-1. Marion is tied with Spring Arbor at 7-2. Huntington, after that win, is now 6-3, and then Taylor is 5-4. Marion has played almost all 4 of these teams to this point, and they've handled business for the most part, except for those 2 that we just mentioned. I think that, the Huntington game is really the story that I'm looking at, and kind of why I wanted to talk about Marion, because they won every quarter, them being the Foresters, except for the 4th, and they only lost it by 2 points. They gave up 26 turnovers. 14 of them were steals by Marion, but they weren't able to convert. That's not very Marion-like, a team that kind of hangs their hat on the defensive side of the ball. And when you look at the offensive side, which, again, they are one of the better offenses in the country because they let their defense feed into their offense, it's been a really bad shooting stretch here. Again, so it's only 3 games, so we're not going to overreact. We're not going to say that, hey, it's DEFCON 1, things are looking bad. No, but you got to kind of start talking about it now because, and this is kind of my next point, and I'll ask you this. 1 game, you can have an off night. That's cool. That's normal. But 2 games and 2 times in a 3-game window, do you start thinking it's still an off night? Like, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt because Marion has definitely earned that benefit of the doubt, or at least having a little bit of extended leeway or a leash. Or do you think it's more of like, hey, something is coming up here? Because in those 2 losses combined, they shot the Knights, 29.9% from the field, 25.4% from the field, averaging out to about 27.7% shooting the ball. And then from three-pointer, which is definitely the bigger hit here in my opinion, 15% in one of their games, 23% in another for 19.6%, significantly below their season averages in both departments. Do you think that's the defense of Huntington and St. Francis, which were the two games that they shot very low in and lost, obviously? Was that more their defense, or was that, Marion, like we said, that hiccup? It's a long season. You're going to go through slumps up and down. Where do you fall on that spectrum of things?
I would say I'm right in the middle. I think there is a reality where Huntington and St. Francis can come out of this holiday break and be on a tear. Defensively, offensively, whatever the case is. I think they can come out and they can show that tenacity and really show that they are fighting for top seats in the conference. There's also a reality where Marion can come out of that same break and just have off nights. The one game that they did win, I don't think there was many people who would have said that they weren't supposed to win that game. The games that were close and ended up losing were games that, were dependent on how they played for sure. But that game that they did win, I believe it was, it was supposed to be for them. So I don't think it changes the process of their hiccups. They can have a hiccup for 5 games. I hope they don't, but they can definitely go ahead and have throughout this 3-game span, they can still be a hiccup for sure. That win doesn't necessarily define anything when it comes to their standard.
I like that point because, like you said, if they would have lost to IWU, I think then we're definitely a little bit closer to that 1-1. So I do think that's a good point to mention. And again, we talked about the numbers for reference for everybody at home. The season average for Marion in terms of shooting the ball from the field and from three is 46.6 from the field and 34.6% from the three-point line. So again, like you mentioned, it is a small sample size. It's only 2 games. But if this continues, this is going to be a very noticeable thing going through the Crossroads here, because at the end of the day, no matter if you're one of the best teams in the country, one of the worst teams in the country, shooting the ball will always be that X factor, because you can go
100%.
hot, you can go cold, you can go a little bit of both. You don't really control that. All coaches are going to say, get in the gym, and when coaches say get in the gym, it's not because they think, oh, now you're not going to miss anymore. It's just that there's a less likely chance you're going to start missing. But at the end of the day, you can get in the gym every single day. Doesn't mean you're going to start shooting the ball like your last name is Curry.
It's all about how you wake up one day, honestly.
The last thing I do want to talk about with this Marion team and why I kind of lean towards, I think the Crossroads has gotten to Marion a little bit more than the hiccups, is the defense. Because when we talk about the defense, this is a Marion team that prides themselves on their defense. They pride themselves on being able to make teams uncomfortable on any given night, on the road or at home. When you look at it, 56.1 is what the team is allowing on the season. 38.5 is what they've been allowing in these past 3 or so games. And so actually, flip that. So it feels like the defense and the offense of these teams across the country are really starting to find, I don't know what the word would be, but it just feels like they're comfortable now dealing with this Marion defense, which is not an easy thing to do. And I don't think comfortable is the right word, but it's the word that I feel best describes what I'm noticing here, because there's too many things in these numbers that I'm looking at where it shows teams are finding little holes, little cracks here that they can maybe exploit. Opponents going into these past 3 games, they were only shooting 47% from the three-point line, and then 40% from the three-point line, 47% from the field. But now things aren't looking very well. Like before that, they were at 35 and 28, but now they're both above 40%. So when you talk about, can this team continue this defensive, identity, at the same time, you also got to wonder, these offenses are going to start this film out. Everybody's got film now on you. Everybody knows, a few things that they can find. It really does feel like the defense for Marion was at such an elite level. I think it's only normal to expect it to come back down, but I don't think it came back down. I think it's just that the rest of the offense has gotten a little bit more time, a little bit more film to try and figure out how to beat this Marion defense. Again, small sample size, not really going to be something that we can say, hey, this is what's going on. But do you think the defense of Marion has come down to earth, or have these offenses in the last few games at least shown that they're coming up to that Marion defensive level?
I think it's two things. I think for one, the defensive and offensive game of any team, this is just based on information, it feels off of momentum. Going into a stretch like this where they're 1 for 2, they did win, they're supposed to win. There's not much momentum going into that. So if there is an aspect of their defense lacking per se, it could definitely be a momentum thing, not necessarily it falling off. Just like the games are catching up to them mentally, and they're kind of taking a hit in that form. But the answer I'm going to lean more towards with is the fact that these other teams have understood the scouting report. They have now gained the knowledge, the attention to detail that this Marion team does provide that you may not have been able to put a pin on it very early on or in the past, but leading into after this break, I believe that these teams, whenever they do come across this Marion team, they know what to do. They know how to combat everything that they can throw at them. And they've understood the rebuttals that come with some of the defensive and offensive switches that they do that helps them be successful.
Now we're going to jump over to another set of teams in the Crossroads who did play this past weekend. St. Francis versus Spring Arbor. St. Francis came out with a 3-point victory. My question on the this or that version is, who scares you more in the Crossroads? Is it St. Francis or is it Spring Arbor? I think both teams have been very well. I think both teams have a case. Again, the teams that are 1 and tied with Marion for 2 in the conference respectively. Where do you fall on that spectrum? Is it St. Francis or is it Spring Arbor that, and when I say scared, I mean if you were Marion, because I do still think, and I'm riding with Marion being the team to beat. Again, small sample size. Has my confidence in them wavered? A little bit, but it ain't nothing crazy. I'm not going to go and jump off the bus just because you had a rough 3-game window.
You're a dramatic guy, so it makes sense.
You know what I'm saying? There's a world where I would have, but I was like, you know what? I know I'm going to hear from Lex, so let me not. Marion is still a team to beat. So from a perspective of if we were both Marion, who would you not want to play in the first round of the postseason, not in the second round of the postseason? Who do you not want to see in the postseason as of right now when it stands if you were the Marion Knights?
It would be St. Francis before the season started, St. Francis halfway through the season, and probably still St. Francis all the way through. I think St. Francis can easily be that team that you can underestimate when it comes to playing against any of the teams in the conference, and St. Francis has the ability to come on top. It's one of those things where they have to wake up that morning, recap on everything that they've discovered within the scouting report, understand that if there were to be shifts and changes to it, that they know how to combat it, and also still be able to come out that same night and produce. All of those things are realistic. All of those things are possible. And all they really need to happen is have the stars fall into place. It's like, it's very much a reality. It just needs to be executed perfectly.
This question, I think, for me at least, it was more about what do I fear more? Do I fear a team who is on a tear in St. Francis, or a team that has a depth element to them that is a real player when you play against them in Spring Arbor? For St. Francis, and I agree with you, I'm going to go with them being the team because why wouldn't you? Like, at this point in the season, they are the number 1 team in the Crossroads. And I'll be honest with you, I love the Cougars coming into the season. I thought they were going to have a great year. I picked them as one of the contenders in our preseason stuff. But I still didn't believe that I was going to be saying that they're number 1 in the Crossroads at this point in January. Maybe later in the month, but even then, I'm like, I don't really know if I can say that. Maybe tied with Marion, but I was not expecting them to hold out the number 1 seed outright. They're on a 9-game winning streak right now, which includes wins over Receiving Votes Taylor, number 5 Marion, Receiving Votes Huntington, number 21 Spring Arbor. Meaning St. Francis has completed the Crossroads gauntlet, which is playing those 4 other teams all in a row for the majority of the time, and came out with it perfect. They came out with it perfect, and only one game was a 1-possession game, that being the last game against Spring Arbor by 3 on the road. Mind you, they also beat a number 25 Southeastern at Southeastern in a very close contest down the stretch 74-66. This team has done something that they've checked every single box. You're beating teams in your conference that you need to beat to be able to be considered a very good top contender in that conference. You're going on the road, which they did against Southeastern, Marion, and Spring Arbor, and handled business. Like, these are things that really intrigue me about this crew. Then you look at the averages, and this is kind of where I really lean St. Francis, because if you're going to beat Marion, you have to have a defense that can slow them down. You're not going to stop them, but you got to slow them down.
100%.
And we look at the numbers. St. Francis is actually shooting below their average number for the season. On average, they're closer to 7. I believe they're like over 70, maybe it's 72 points per game, something like that. In these last 9 games now, they're shooting at 65. They're making 65 points per game. That is a very low number in the Crossroads, especially. But it's the defense
10 points make a difference.
The defense has just turned things around, because you look at it, they're holding opponents to 47 points per game, under 50 by at least a possession. They're holding opponents to 32% shooting from the field, 23% from a three-point line. And for reference on the numbers, their season averages, opponents are putting up 50 points per game. They're shooting 34% from the field, and they're shooting 25% from the three-point line. So all 3 major stats when it comes to defense are significantly lower. All 3 major stats when it comes to defense have been dominated flat out by St. Francis. This team is playing like a top 10 team in the country. They would have to be my most scary team if I was Marion. Not saying that I don't think Marion can beat them. I think Marion can beat anybody in the Crossroads. But you're talking about a team who's only lost 1 game, who's been at the top the entire year, and now at the right time, their defense has seemed to click into a different gear, but their offense still has a little ways to go, which what scares me. Because now if you peg in, I don't even need a great offense. Give me a good enough offense. If that number at 65, or the number 65 points per game, get me a little closer to 70. I don't even need you to cross 70, but give me to 68, 69 points per game. Now we're talking about a real threat in the Crossroads that I think needs to be taken very seriously, and a real threat in the national tournament that can make a deep run at it. With that being said, talk to me a little bit about this Spring Arbor team, because I do think they have a ways, a kind of avenue here to make a statement soon. But just let me know what's your take on this Cougars team. It's a Cougars battle right now in the Crossroads, in my opinion. But where are you looking at for this Spring Arbor team, and what are your points that you wanted to heighten and to enlighten the folks at home about what this crew can really do?
Spring Arbor genuinely needs to continue to utilize their depth. I think they have a solid 5-woman roster starting with them, and then you can hit their bench, you can sub out your people, and still have them impact in that same form. They need to find different alternatives to utilize those 9-10 ladies, spread them out, come up with different rosters, different tactics, and how to approach your opponents that can throw them off so much to where you make them question your scouting report entirely. You have to make them fill the scouting report so much to where when they go into film one day, instead of it being 2-3 pages, it's a packet.
I like that point on the packet, because this team, it is the name, that is their identity. Like, obviously, I've talked to some of the coaches at Spring Arbor. I've seen them play live a few times now. They're really great on defense. They play with a pace that is very hard to combat with and even try to outrun them. It's not going to work. You try to slow them down, that doesn't matter. They're still going to make you have to play their pace. But the depth has always been what I said this team is really interesting. They are currently in the middle of that Crossroads gauntlet that I mentioned. Now, again, St. Francis went a perfect 4-0 in that gauntlet. It's a very tall task to ask. Spring Arbor right now, they already lost to St. Francis. They beat Taylor. Their next 2 games are Huntington and Marion. Very tough. I still think the floor is 2-2. I've always thought they would go 2-2 in those 4 games. Can they go 3-1? That's a tough tall to ask, but I do think that 2-2 is realistic. We're talking about the depth, and we're going to talk about the depth of this team in a minute here. But this team starts and ends with Megan Zaitz, because she's the only player averaging over 10 points per game right now. She's on a streak of at least 10 points in the last 10 games of the season. She's putting up 15 a night on 5 rebounds with an efficient 42% from the field. She's in these last 10 games, she's also had her season high of 25 points. She's had multiple double-doubles, including one in this streak against Rio Grande with 11 rebounds. She's been an all-conference and all-Crossroads League first-team player, wire to wire. I think she's got a real case at being player of the year if this Cougars team stays where they are and beat some of these big teams here coming up. But again, the depth is just unreal. I mean, you talk about Megan being the only one at over 10 points, but you've got 7 players at 5 or more. You've got 2 players who are at 9.4 and 9.9 respectively. So they're going to, in my opinion, they're basically 10-point per game scorers right now. Then you've got another player at 8.7. Those 3 ladies, Haven Chapman, Ashley Weller, and Emma Miskika. Haven, 4 games now in a row of at least 10 points, so she's found a little bit of a groove offensively that we love to see. She's had multiple double-doubles all year. For Ashley, she's been on a bigger offensive run for a longer time. 6 out of the last 10 games, she's gone over 10 points, and the team is 5-1 in those games. So when she scores above 10 points, it's a pretty good sign that the team is kind of hitting on all cylinders on that side of the ball. And then for Emma, she hasn't crossed 10 points since December 30th, so she hasn't really been scoring, but the efficiency has been what her name of the game has kind of impacted on this team. She's shooting 42% from the field on the season, but for these last 4 games, she's closer to 50%. And that's really where I like that this depth has really shown. It's a situation where maybe you don't have a lot of scorers, but the players you do have a role. And when they play their role, it's really magnified a lot of these things. The Spring Arbor team is really interesting. They're also set up for the future because out of the 4 ladies that we just talked about, only 1 is a senior. So you've got 3 of them coming back next year. They might have the best returning group. We'll talk about that in the summer when that time does come.
For sure.
But this Cougars battle is legit now. Before, I think it was Marion and the rest of the conference. And I was respecting the rest of the conference because I do think the Crossroads will have 3 teams at least in the national tournament, and that's being nice. They might get 4, could even get 5. But I think 4 is a real number here. Now we're talking about a 3-horse race. Now we're talking about Marion, St. Francis, and Spring Arbor, not to mention Taylor and Huntington are still going to have something to say about that. Very exciting to see what the Crossroads going to deliver as we get further on to the season. Now we're going to head down south, and we're going to go to the Sooner Athletic Conference. USAO versus Nelson. My simple this or that question for you is this a bigger win for Nelson or a bigger loss for USAO? Where do you land on that spectrum? Where great win or a really tough loss?
I think it's a really tough loss. I think coming into the second half of the year when everything matters to the last turnover to the very particular shooting percentage, I think it impacts you more than taking a great win from a team who you stole it from. And I think having the loss come out in this fashion really just opens your eyes to what the rest of the season could look like and how much they have to fine tune leading into that, because the Sooner Athletic Conference isn't one to mess around with. So definitely a harder loss for them, without a doubt.
I'm not mad at it. I can understand the vision. I'm gonna go bigger win for Nelson though, just because this was also a team who 1-2 in their last 3 games, kind of falling a little bit. They were the number 1 seed going into January in the SAC. Now they're kind of a little bit in the middle. You kind of needed this win because USAO was, I believe, at the time of this game, either tied with or ahead of Nelson or right behind them. Like they were in the mix for that top seed, and this win kind of stops the free fall a little bit because now you're a half game ahead of MACU for 3rd, but remember, MAC already beat Nelson this year, so that kind of does throw a little wrench into things. We talk about tiebreaker situations. And then you're also a half game ahead behind USAO, who was above them, obviously, and Langston, who are both tied for the first seed. Though Nelson is now 1-1 with those teams, losing to Nelson earlier this year and then now beating USAO. This game was actually a offensive just juggernaut of a ball game. I mean, 92-91 was the final score.
Nearing 200 points is crazy.
183 points combined in 40 minutes, not even overtime. This is a 40-minute game, y'all. This was not an overtime game. So it's crazy to say that, and obviously you know that that's going to happen because you have 30-point scores on both sides of the ball. For USAO, you had Evangela Dalvalukuk. She had 37 points, almost a 40-ball, career high for her. And then for the Lions, obviously, Lauren Salis, she went for a career high 31. An unreal 76.9% from the field at 10 of 13, and that includes 8 of 11 from the three-point line. The girl couldn't miss anywhere on the court. I do think, though, the reason I go big win for Nelson is because of the seeding. I'll even give you another kind of notch to that point of a tough loss. Late game execution hurts when that's the reason you lose this game. I went and watched the end of that game because obviously any close game that I don't get to watch live or that I hear about, I try to go back to that last possession and see what happened. Was there anything crazy? It's already happened a few times, obviously, this year. In this game, the Nelson crew gets to a 3-point lead with a pair of Paris Milton free throws. Cool. 4.4 seconds, I think it was, on the clock. Drover didn't have a timeout. They had to go the length of the court. So now I'm looking at the length of the court, and I'm like, all right, well, let's see what happens. In the play-by-play on the box score, it said that they went for 2. I kind of got a little confused. I said, well, why would they go for 2? They're down 3. So I go back to watch the video. They make the baseball pass. Like, it was caught. I saw the 3 coming, and I thought, oof, foot was on the line. Must have been. They went for 2, and I could tell by the reaction of the bench and some of the players on the court, there was a miscommunication on what the score was and what they needed to force overtime or maybe even win the game if something crazy were to happen. So I do think that part of it does make it a tougher loss for USAO. I still think it's a bigger win for Nelson because you stopped the free fall that you were kind of going into because now you're going from 1-2 to now 2-2 in your last 4 games. You could have been 1-3. That's a really tough place to be in right now in the SAC. So I do think it's a bigger win, but it's just a tough pill to swallow for me if you're USAO. You had a chance. You had a clean enough opportunity to get the 3 off. It doesn't go that way, so you hate to see it. But in January, details matter.
It has to happen.
It happens so much more than we all would like to admit. It's happened to all of us at some point in our basketball career, but we just got to pick ourselves up from the mat and get ready for the next one because there are some very important games coming up, and USAO is one of them. When you guys are watching it, you guys will be watching on a Monday morning. There is a big matchup in the SAC today. Receiving votes MACU versus receiving votes USAO. Talk about 2 teams who are trying to get a stranglehold or a better grasp in the top part of the SAC, which right now, the SAC standings as of today, Langston and USAO are tied at 9-2. Nelson's at 9-3. And then MACU and College of the Ozarks are at 8-3. And not too far behind is Wayland Baptist at 6-5. So very, very much in race for anything to happen right now. And again, with MACU and USAO playing, you've got a situation now, if MACU wins that game, now we've got 3 teams tied at 9-3, all with wins over each other. Then you've also got a situation where if USAO wins, now they're one step closer to being ahead of or in the race for that number 1 seed a little more comfortably. I do also have John Brown versus College of the Ozarks. Even though John Brown's at 4-6 right now, just on the edge of the playoff picture, they can still make a run at it, and I've seen them be able to close out some of these games a little better. Maybe they get some of these wins. So those 2 games, keep in mind today for the SAC when that time does come later in the afternoon and in the evening. Last conference we're going to touch on real quick before we hit some quick notes across the country. The Heart. The Heart. Benedictine versus Grandview. It's a tough pill for me to swallow because I've been saying all year, like, Benedictine's a really good team in the Heart. Y'all cannot overlook them. They're going to be a contender. They're that team that every conference has one team at least that as the season goes on, they get better and better and better and better. Benedictine is that team. Grandview, who's already suffered a loss this season, I expected them to come into this game, balls to the wall, ready to go. Let's go out there and have a great one. Wasn't the case.
We all were.
Wasn't the case. Benedictine comes out with the win in a very, very important game. Benedictine now sits number 1 in the conference that also includes Mid-American Nazarene, who is number 11 in the country, and Grandview, who's receiving votes, and beat Mid-American Nazarene. Is this more of a Benedictine win or a Grandview loss? Now, the difference between the last 2 questions that I'm asking here is, for this game specifically, do you think it's more on Grandview losing than Benedictine winning? I do think it's a Benedictine win because they obviously had to go out and take this one, but are there elements of it where it makes you think, I think Grandview could have gotten this one out if they would have done certain things a little better?
I think there's for sure Grandview lost. Just dissecting everything, 14 points in second half entirely from that Grandview squad. That can hurt anybody, no matter if you're short on the top of the league in general or somebody on the bottom half, coming out with 7 in the third, 7 in the fourth, and just being outscored double both times in every quarter. It's gut wrenching. Not even to mention leading into January, which is already a jam-packed month. It does take a toll on not only your confidence, but the course of your season. Benedictine did take the win with confidence. That went very well. And I will continue to root for them, but I definitely do think it's a Grandview loss for sure.
This game was the definition of a full 40. How important full 40s are in January, meaning playing till the last buzzer. Going into the halftime, the score was 34-37. Benedictine was up. Benedictine scored 29 points in the fourth quarter. In the second half. Not a great scoring for a halftime, obviously, no matter if it's first half or second half. The real problem was Grandview put up 14 total second half points. They went 7-7 in the third and fourth quarter. Only 6 players scored for the Vikings, and 20 of the points came from Anna Gosling. So if you take her out of it, the offense for Grandview did not have a great night in this one, or great afternoon, because it was Saturday afternoon. One of the things that that really kind of is a pet peeve of mine is using the phrase, talking about shooting slumps we did earlier in this episode, talking about like, a team just had a rough night shooting the ball, they just missed shots, whatever the case is. And the reason it kind of irks me a little bit saying that is because it's always felt like, for me, you're kind of discrediting the defense that was on the court that also was part of that. So I always try to give love to the defense. And I do think, especially in this game, I tend to lean more to the Benedictine defense being more of the reason that Grandview shot so bad in the second half, because it gives the vibe that the defense of the Ravens just wore down Grandview. It just wore them down for the full 20 minutes in that second half, and then that's what ended up becoming the product of it. And what really kind of stood out for me in this game, and why I say it's more of a Benedictine win, Grandview Benedictine, they had 13 turnovers. 11 steals were Grandview. So it wasn't a situation where, things did not look, or there wasn't opportunities for Grandview, I should say, to be able to score the ball in this one. I mean, when you talk about a game where, again, Grandview has 13 turnovers and Benedictine has 11 steals, that means that the Benedictine defense was pressuring them the entire game. It wasn't a situation where they're getting clean looks. They probably did get a lot of clean looks. They probably missed a lot of clean looks. But why does that happen? At the end of the day, yes, missed layups happen. You're going to miss open shots. But I also believe that if you've been dealing with a defense like Benedictine's defense for a full 30 minutes, full 20 minutes already, when you get to that second half, legs are a little heavier. Things don't look as easy. I'm working really hard on the shot clock now for just one shot, let alone maybe trying to get another one, and I got to do it all over again. So it's one of those things where I do believe the Benedictine defense hunkered down and controlled the offense of Grandview more than Grandview missing shots. They did miss shots, but at that point when you're missing shots, I promise you the game was already decided. 14 points in the second half.
Oh, for sure.
I'm sorry. As much as that's going to be a shooting slump and probably a blip all season, you got to credit the defense. Benedictine did something that they are well known for in the heart, playing hard defense the entire 40 and wearing down your opponents. Really big win for Benedictine. I think it's going to be now, talk about 3-horse race in the Crossroads. We got a 3-horse race in the heart now. We've got the Ravens, we got Mid-America Nazarene, and now Grandview. And that's not to mention, when we look at the rest of the Heart, when we look at the standings, you still have a Missouri Valley, who picked up a massive win over Grandview already. Mind you, Grandview still has Mid-America Nazarene lined up. So there's a world where Grandview can fall to like 4th or 5th turn going into the postseason tournament. You also have Culver Stockton, Central Methodist, and Peru State all tied at 7-4. The race in the Heart is just as good as any other conference. So keep an eye on the Heart, because another conference that I could see 2 for sure. Well, 2 obviously because they have auto bids. I could see 3. You could talk me into 4. You could talk me into 4 in the Heart right now where it stands. And obviously the ARCs and Quads are coming out on Tuesday. It's going to be a really, really interesting thing to look out for. But this is a really big win for Benedictine and a tough loss, absolutely, for Grandview. Before we go off, we do have a few quick points. Lex was telling me a little bit earlier that he wanted to touch on the HBCU conference. I know we haven't given them a little bit as much love as I know we should. So, Lex, what exactly did you want to talk about? Is there a game or a couple of games that you wanted to kind of highlight from the HBCU world this past weekend?
There's 2 games that took place yesterday that really shook the standings a bit, honestly. You have Stillman, who came over to Wilberforce, and then you have Wiley, who came over to Tougaloo this past Saturday. And Wilberforce very much shocked. Stillman took a W, and Tougaloo ended up sticking out a closer matchup as well. Looking into the statistics of it all, you have to understand Wilberforce being not so high up in the conference right now. They usually sit in the middle of the pack here with the east side of the HBCU, going into 2-5 conference right now after this win. It wasn't realistically, that game was an all-around showcase between Jordan Harris and Costas Chaplin. Both your big guys coming into the game. It was really about who could dominate better and help their team reserve that win. You have Chaplin with Wilberforce coming out with 16 boards, 12 points, 4 assists, and a steal. With all of their supporting factors, Michaela Smith coming into it, you have Lanaya Early stepping into it, getting 6 rebounds, 12 points. You have offensive input from Wilberforce all across the bench, only leaving 2 players who didn't end up impacting the score offensively, but still providing other stats with rebounding, assisting, defensive efforts. The Stillman team had a very strong bench effort, having just 10, 22, 27, almost 30 points off the bench, but it still wasn't enough to come out on top of that one. What were your thoughts since you had a chance to look at that one a little bit?
For me in the HBCU world, I do think, and I agree with you, like that Wilberforce game is a big one because Stillman was the only other team with 1 loss at the time. And the hunt for Oakwood, who's right now in the number 1 in the East at 7-0 in conference play. Now they're 2 games ahead of Stillman and Russ, who are tied at 4-2. Wilberforce obviously has a big win for them to kind of get their second conference win of the season. So I do think that's going to. If I'm an Oakwood fan, I was a Wibbler fan over the weekend. That's for sure, because now I got a little bit of breathing room from the rest of the pack. And then on the west side of things, I think that Tougaloo and Wiley game is massive because Wiley now has Paul Quinn one more time. I want to say coming up this week, if not very soon. So Paul Quinn, who's 7-1 now. Again, if I'm a Paul Quinn fan, I was a Tougaloo fan over the weekend because now I have
this Thursday.
Exactly. So Paul Quinn and Wiley are playing this Thursday. That's a big matchup because if you're Wiley, you have a chance to kind of erase almost that Tougaloo loss by pulling Paul Quinn back down to 7-2 and be able to be tied up with you in conference play. The HBCU has been a very interesting conference. I know it's been under the radar for the past for a couple months now, but there are some interesting games. I do think the top end of the West intrigues me a little bit more than the East because, again, Oakwood in the East has been running away with it. 7-0 all conference season, 11-5 overall, by the way. So they're not a bad team by any stretch. It's not just beating up on conference teams. They are going out and winning basketball games. And then if you're talking about the West, Paul Quinn 7-1, Wiley 5-2, Tougaloo 5-3, Philander Smith 4-3, Dillard 4-4. Those 5 teams are all jockeying for position, and then there's even a world where I can see Dillard. Hey, we hit a winning streak here. We've jumped up a few notches in the standing. So the HBCU is going to be another conference race that I want to keep an eye on. Specifically, the West. specifically the West, but I do think the East is going to have some interesting things to say as the season goes on. I did want to touch on one thing before we head on and get into our week here on this MLK Day. First things first. I talked about it in the previous episode last Friday, where I thought Freed-Hardeman should be the number one team in the country. They are one of the last 2 teams undefeated. They've been undefeated all year. If you want to hear about my rant, go watch our episode. I said if they were going to beat Campbellsville this past weekend, I'm coming on here Monday morning and I'm riding. I told y'all all of it. I think Lindsey Wilson heard me. I think Lindsey Wilson decided that we're going to throw a curveball at him because Freed-Hardeman did beat Campbellsville. They beat them pretty handily. Pulling up the score here, it was 67-56. So 9-point game there, a solid win, 11-point game, solid win there for Freed-Hardeman. And it was at Campbellsville. So I was gonna come in here. I was gonna get the notes, all of it. But something told me, let's double check. There was one game before this game. That was Lindsey Wilson at Lindsey Wilson. And I can officially say now we are down to one team in the country who is undefeated because Lindsey Wilson hosted Freed-Hardeman and beat Freed-Hardeman 70-63. In this game, we talked about it earlier. It's hard to say teams, shoot the ball bad, whatever the case is. Freed-Hardeman did not have a great shooting night, which is crazy to say because they still shot 40% from the field, 35% from the three-point line, and 94% from the free throw line. But the problem was the scoring discrepancy and also a specific person, Medow Tisdale. 33 points, 12 rebounds in 35 minutes of play. The girl was an absolute unit in this game. She could not be stopped. She was everywhere when it came to offense side of things. The leading scorers for the Freed-Hardeman Tigers, Rachel Satterley, she had 22. Allie Weathers, she had 15. We quick math here. That's 37 points. Tisdale almost outscored both of the leading scorers for Freed-Hardeman. That is where this game really came down to. And credit to Tisdale. She had an absolute, again, I've said it before, when you have your best players, sometimes the X's and O's, throw them out the window. The game plan, throw them out the window. Just have your best players go out and do what they do.
Giving the ball at the top of the key.
Let them work. Let them work. We all know when she catches that ball at the elbow, at the low block, it's a bucket. It's going to be a bucket every time. And she did that 33 points. 33 points. She did her big piece. And I think, again, nothing against the depth of Lindsey Wilson because you still had 10 points from Claire Fleming. You still had a very good contribution from everybody else. The rest of the rotation, quick math here, 9, 18, plus another 9. That's 27 points from the rest of the team that wasn't named Tisdale or Fleming. So a very good contribution around for Lindsey Wilson. I think it's a really big win for Lindsey Wilson. This is a win that can, if they do well in the conference of the Mid-South, they could have just punched their ticket with an at-large bid. I'm not picking them to win the conference just yet, but they were already going to have a good case. This is a massive win for Freed-Hardeman. With that being said, round of applause for William Carey. You are the last team left undefeated in the country. You are now sitting atop the NAIA at a record of 16-0. Props to y'all, ladies. Props to y'all. And it's funny because when we put up the polls on our Twitter of who we thought, who the country thought that would stay undefeated longer, I believe it was 70+% said William Carey. I understand why. The Mid-South is just too hard of a conference for the Freed-Hardeman Tigers to stay as long as they were. They did a very good job, again, being at the time now, they're going to be 18-1. They did a great job through 18 games. But William Carey got to 16. Let's see how long that lasts. But, again, very big win for Lindsey Wilson. Got to give props. I'm a man of my word. Can't come on here. Even the committee knew. Freed-Hardeman's good. They're not number one good. Maybe William Carey should have been even higher. I do lay in on that. I did say William Carey should have been the highest receiving votes team to come into the polls, not Eastern Oregon. Nothing against Eastern Oregon, but I just knew William Carey is a better team right now as it stands, and I'm glad that William Carey has proved me right in a different way. Lex, appreciate you coming on, man. Obviously, we've been working around on your schedule. I think that you're going to be able to get on a lot more consistently. I know I'm going to be able to have at least more things for you as well. So I'm very excited for the rest of the season. A lot of things lined up here. I know you're going to be a lot more a part of things behind the scenes, so I'm looking forward to having you see a lot of the stuff. We got some stuff planned. Some of the things I haven't even told Lex about, y'all. I haven't even told Lex about some of the plans yet because I want to see his reactions. I want him to be excited. But I'm glad to have you back, man. First time we've seen each other since New Year, so Happy New Year's. Obviously, 18 days late, but hey, better late than never. And we did text over,
100%.
so we just said it over the phone. We just never said it in person. So we got to make sure to get that cleared here. But I appreciate you, dog. For everybody at home, thank you all so much for all the support. We look forward to continuing to provide coverage as January goes on and into the months of February and March. Again, we've got a lot of things planned. Very excited for you guys to see it. But that will do it for this episode of Hoop Report. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch y'all in the next one. Peace.